All right. Yes. So, Marita, welcome to the Healthy Science podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you as a PI with a whole team to talk about mental health within academia. And we talked beforehand already a bit, and you already said, yeah, people are just struggling and you see it around you. So it's important, I think, we talk about this and also maybe look for some advice or solutions that we can incorporate into academia and science.
Yeah.
But first, let's start off with tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm Marita Partanen. I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist and proudly born and raised in Canada. I did my training, my master's PhD in Vancouver, and then I went to Toronto to Sick Kids Hospital. I did my residency there, and then I moved to the US to do my postdoctoral fellowship. And for about 4 years or so, I was working in pediatric oncology and specifically neuropsychology. And I really loved it. And when I was looking for faculty positions towards the end of my fellowship, the job posting came up at Princess Maxima. I didn't really ever think that I would move overseas. It was always maybe kind of a joke to move overseas. But yeah, it was just a really good match in terms of what I wanted to do with my career as a neuropsychologist, but in research, and to be at a new center focused on pediatric oncology. So that's why I came over. And so now I've been working 3 years as a research group leader. So time has flown by here in the Netherlands.
You enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. You talk passionately about it, so it's nice to see.
No, it's gone really well. I think the nice thing about being at a new center is I've had the opportunity to be involved with lots of different things. So in research, but also in the clinic. So that's been nice for me, and I think for my team to be involved with different things.
And so we talked a bit before we started recording the interview, and you said you saw some people also struggling around you regarding the mental health, and would you like to share a bit of what you see is going on, maybe in a broader sense, but what you see is going on regarding mental health in academia?
Yeah, I think, well, how to put it in words, I guess. I see people struggling in terms of that they take on a lot of responsibility and feel that they need to be responsible for all these different things, and maybe don't ask for help or don't realize that it's too much. And so maybe the reflection or being able to say no, we always say yes.
Yeah.
Keep saying yes, and then it's you can't say yes to everything. So I see people taking on a lot of responsibilities, and then it becoming too much for them. And we of course really want to support them too, that in their professional and personal development. So it's hard as a supervisor, I think, that want to give people the freedom and availability to grow, but also don't want to overwhelm as well at the same time.
Yeah, because that would have been my next question. Like, how do you try as a supervisor and PI to, maybe take away a bit of a responsibility, but and try to sort of guide them in that sense?
Yeah, we've tried to delegate where we can. And to be honest, more recently, a question that I've been asking is, has it become too much? Because if you're just asking a generic question like, how are you doing? Majority of people will just say, fine.
Yeah.
Good, no problem. So I think we have to, maybe as supervisors, to be a bit more explicit in asking questions of how things are going on a personal level. Because if you don't ask it explicitly, then maybe doesn't come up on the table.
Yeah. Don't you feel like they would say it or let you know by themselves?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Probably depends on your individual relationship. I can imagine for some, the difference in hierarchy, even though we say there's no hierarchy, there is.
Yeah.
That, you know, a young master's student or something, I can imagine that it's intimidating to approach your superiors to say that I'm struggling and I need some help. So maybe, you know, having avenues that they can have discussions with their own peers about this kinds of topics, I think is also good. And maybe we don't have enough opportunities to do that.
Yeah, so why do you think we don't have that many opportunities? Like we're all too busy and like there is no room for that, or
Yeah, our schedules
yeah.
are full, you know, with meetings, and you're thinking about projects and, you know, to be honest, you know, we think of our meeting schedule and this agenda points, and you go through all the agenda points and that's it. If not, if maybe we have to have an agenda point that's asking about
Yeah.
mental health, how everyone's doing.
Yeah.
Because then it just does come up. It's you're in a work environment, so you're thinking about work, I think, most of the time, but you bring your personal life with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think what I also hear a lot from PhD students mostly is that they, even though they have a good relationship with their supervisor, so the ones who do not, they don't even talk about it at all. But when you do have a good relationship, I think it's first something to cherish, but also something to make use of. Because you know your supervisor can really help you out, maybe not fully, but knows maybe some, you know, the way towards more help or support. And what I hear a lot is that people are afraid of, you know, their supervisor or colleagues looking at them differently, so that they are not up for it, or they are failing, or they don't get the opportunities to grow as a scientist, for example. Do you hear that as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. The fear of failure. We've talked recently, we had a workshop about this, about perfectionism, and we always want to be perfect, and then, you know, everybody makes mistakes, so but why do we hide them? You know, what one of the examples is I was fired from a job once when I was a teenager as a as a restaurant server. Apparently I wasn't very good. But you know, like, why? You'd still learn from it. It's like, why do we have to call it a failure? We have to have a better word for it, maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so definitely people want to have things perfect, including myself. I'm very visual. I like to, you know, I notice little small things, and I try to fix it, but I think I've become more aware of it over the years.
Yeah, so I think that's an important step, right? To become aware of it. That's the first thing. And then you can also start adjusting and maybe learn how to deal with it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's only you putting the pressure on yourself.
Yes.
You know, even, well, maybe there are definitely supervisors who push too much, maybe, but sometimes, you know, even if you say no worries, that we can extend deadlines, sometimes people are just putting the pressure on themselves. So that's maybe just the culture that academia has taught us to be.
Yeah.
So
I think academia also attracts a certain type of person.
Sure.
Who is a bit more, maybe a bit more neurotic and a bit more perfectionist and all, and you know, detail oriented.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it has its benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Detail-oriented, organized people, you know, that can run a project or think of new ideas, creative people. So there's benefits of it. That's why we hire these kinds of people. But then it comes sometimes at a, at a cost when people try to do everything perfectly, when in the end it doesn't need to be. So
Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
it's difficult. Yeah. And you said before, I mean, in terms of the people who have a bad or not so good relationship with their supervisor,
Hmm.
um, does the supervisor know?
Yeah. That's a good question. Maybe they think they are actually doing a very good job.
I can imagine, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask all my team members, but I think I have a pretty good relationship, but I if I didn't, I don't know if I would yeah, I don't know if everybody knows. So
Mm.
how do they have a way to communicate that to their supervisor without it becoming too awkward, right?
Yeah.
It's not
That's a
a
good question. Yeah. Because that's a whole spectrum, right? Of having a good relationship and a very bad relationship. You know, some things are really not okay.
yeah,
So some things are very on the bad side. But there's so much in between. And I think we tried at the FU, when I was doing a PhD, we tried doing a talk every year about, you know, how you function and how you develop. But
mhm,
also they ask you regarding your supervisor, like would you need something more from that person or something
yeah,
else, or you know. But I found it still very hard to tell my supervisor that, because you had that talk with the supervisor. So I
yeah,
think if you do have a bad relationship, you don't really feel the safety or
yeah,
openness, you know,
yeah,
to talk about it. Yeah.
yeah. So this wasn't an independent person. This was like,
Exactly.
yeah. We have those too. Um, but I've heard of universities having an independent person having these yearly interviews as well.
That would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, you still have your one with your supervisor because you have to think of project, or what, progress or whatever. But yeah, the independent person, I don't know, might help
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
idea. And I really like the what you say, like you really have to be explicit about asking them how they are doing, not just in general, but really, okay, is it too much? Is it becoming too much? Is it still, you know, fitting your hours, or is it still, are you still doing okay on this and this?
yeah,
I really love that. I think that's a very concrete and good tip also towards supervisors to do that more often. Yeah.
yeah. And that's just coming from a hunch. I don't know if it helps, but it shouldn't hurt, I guess,
Yeah.
is the point. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were saying that you are yourself also a bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah, of course.
So
Because it,
when you were a young researcher, so before you came to Holland, I guess, um, um, yeah, did you have some struggles yourself regarding mental health or dealing with the stress of the environment?
yeah, I mean, mental health, I mean, I didn't experience a burnout or so, or needing to leave work because of mental health issues. Definitely get stressed from time to time.
Mm,
And what we were talking about before, my training was doing both clinic and research at the same time.
yeah.
I remember, I laugh now, but it was a difficult time. When I was studying for my board certification, like to become licensed as a psychologist,
Hmm.
for me, the way it is it's a big exam that you study for. It's like a 4-hour exam. You just go to this center and it's a multiple choice exam. And yeah, you can fail. People definitely fail. It's a very expensive test. Anyway, so you study for months.
Yeah.
And then the day before the exam, stupidly, I took the practice exam. I should have done it weeks before. I did it the day before, which was dumb. And then I didn't do very well. So then I remember during that time, and it wasn't just that day, but yeah, super stressed. And I started doing what do you call them? The mindfulness apps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember just lying on my floor and yeah, following some of those mindfulness activities. I found that really helpful actually. So breathing exercises and just
Some
following.
meditation.
Yeah. So that's the most prominent in my mind of that having to study for exam, having clinic, having your research to do. It was a lot. So yeah, that worked for me. More mindfulness meditation techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what, so regarding when you were doing a PhD,
Yeah.
were there things you didn't really agree upon within the academic environment, or that were just differently than what you expected beforehand, how it would be?
I had a pretty good PhD supervisor. We really got along, and I was very independent, actually. I came up with my research question. We got funding for it. We worked together to get funding for it, and then I ran the study. So actually, I felt quite independent, maybe more so than some of my colleagues. So, I mean, that's in a good way. I'm saying that I was independent, then and I wasn't really expecting that piece. So that was a good thing. But I think for me, because I was doing clinical work at the same time, that kind of expectations were definitely different. You're not independent at all. You're very much handheld, and I didn't like it because I was like, the kind of the making tons of corrections on your reports, or the supervisor having to be there all the time. It felt, I realized I was a trainee, but sometimes it felt like I wanted to do it more on my own. I felt if I was doing it more on my own, I could learn more.
Yeah. I felt exactly the same during my combination, like PhD clinical work. Yeah. I recognize this. Yeah.
And so maybe sometimes those supervisors feel that they can't let go, kind of the not power, but feeling that they have to control it. And maybe I have to remind myself of that sometimes, because they're grown adults, and the whole point is they're supposed to grow into independence. That's the point. But if you have a supervisor who doesn't allow you to do that, then how are you supposed to grow?
Yeah.
So so I would say that would be the part that I didn't meet my expectations. And to be honest, it wasn't something I really would bring up either, because again, it's hard to tell your supervisor to back off.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think it might also be confusing because one part of the time you're working very independently, and the other part of the time, you're not allowed, let's say, to do so. So you also have to sort of switch in your work mentality and stuff. So it's, I think, also quite confusing within yourself and conflicting.
Yeah. And I can imagine this might happen for PhDs or postdocs who have multiple projects, or multiple supervisors, for example. One who might be able to give lots of leeway, lots of freedom, and the other doesn't. So I can imagine that's a challenge if we're thinking mainly about PhD students. So maybe
I hear that often. So because you always have multiple, when you're doing a PhD, you also have multiple promoters and professors around you, and they all have different styles, personalities, and expectations. So it might be very hard to keep up with everyone's expectations, and to maneuver in that sense, which gives also an additional pressure to yourself because you want to do right by everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to burn any bridges, right? So it's challenging.
Yeah. So how, if we come back to the responsibility, I just wanted to ask you a bit about that, because it seems an important thing. I hear it more and more often, also during a work-life balance workshop, for example. Then responsibility always comes up, that people feel responsible, and that they also think that's a good thing. And I
Yeah,
think that is a good thing in you
yeah,
know, the basic fundamental part, but it gets, yeah, too much.
yeah.
Uh, so what would you say as a PI, what would be the responsibility of a PhD student? So where do you really expect them to be responsible for within your team?
Yeah. I mean, if there's an open study, the day-to-day of running the study, for sure. But I hope they realize that we're running these studies together. And ultimately, as the PI is ultimately responsible for making sure that the research question is well formed and we calculate sample sizes, we think about the design. So I wouldn't say they should be responsible for all of those details. It's too much. The PI or your supervisor is supposed to be the expert, or the team, the supervisory team should be the experts. So for them to come up with the research questions and get funding, for example, definitely not, and run the whole study and run all the analyses and write all the papers by themselves, I think that'd be stupid. They shouldn't have to do everything by themselves. It should be a team effort.
Yeah. And how would that look like? Like they would come to you with an idea about it, so they thought about it themselves already, or would you really like to think together, brainstorm about it, for example?
Yeah, I think it depends if it's already like a grant-funded study, right? That the
Oh,
PhD is being hired and the idea is already there.
mhm.
But let's say it's somebody who comes in with their own funding, or there's another source and they can come up with whatever they want. I think that's a bit more rare, but that does happen. No, I think you should do it together. Definitely come with your interest and your passion of a certain topic, area, or research question for sure. But the fine tuning of all the details, I think you should do together. You can't expect a PhD student to know everything about the literature and research design. They're learning,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yes, doing everything on their own. I don't think they should be responsible for that. But, maybe other
Yeah.
supervisors have different opinions, but
Yeah,
I'd
I
rather
hear a
do it
lot
as
of
a
other
team.
stories. Yeah. But I really like this idea because then it also becomes a team effort, right? And two always know more than one. That's definitely
Yeah,
always the case, even if you're not in this hierarchical sense, you know, an expert and a learning student.
yeah,
But what I also think is what I always advise PhD students regarding responsibility is to talk openly towards their supervisors and keep them updated so they can also see, hey, that might not go in the right direction. Maybe we could, you know, talk about it and look at it a bit more, plan a meeting about it, and they can steer and guide already in an early stage.
yeah, yeah,
So that you have more maybe the responsibility to be open and transparent, and talk about what you think is a good idea, or where do you might see a problem coming, or where
yeah,
you're in doubt of yourself or insecure of yourself.
yeah,
I think that is also a nice responsibility to take as a PhD student, because then you can really solve and think about these things together.
right. Yeah, yeah,
But
no,
then, you know, it has to feel safe. So that's also the
yeah,
yeah, that's sometimes hard.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And how do you build a safe environment, I guess, is also a question.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good workshop for for PIs and supervisors and all.
Okay. You're
Yeah,
willing to run it. Great, thanks.
yeah. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's first be supportive for the PhD students, and then
yeah,
later we can step up
yeah.
a level. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, to wrap it up, I always like to end with a piece of advice or something you think is really important to give away towards the PhD students to maybe help them a bit?
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe lots of advice, I guess.
Yeah, it's always hard to pick pick one or
Uh,
two, but yeah.
to pick one. Yeah, again, maybe you don't have to do everything on your own, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, the research is better when it's two is better than one, but really we're in team of like 20 or 30 or whatever it is, your group, but also your colleagues that you work with.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you can learn from each other, right? I think having, and this is what I'm really an advocate for, is having diversity in our teams. Because if you just have one type of background or one type of research background, for example, and you just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You have some fresh perspectives on it if you have a more diverse group.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, so I hope that people, PhDs, at least in my perspective, I think it's really it's a team effort, it's a group effort. So hope they don't realize they have to do everything on their own.
Yeah. Well, that's a very nice end, I think, to the podcast interview. And thank you so much for making the time and sharing. I think we have some great tips and advice as well throughout the interview that we can share with the PhD students that might help them and guide them a bit, support them a bit. And if you are listening, watching, and you have some comments or questions or thoughts about this, feel free to share them. So DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can look us up both, I guess, and or on YouTube below in the comments. That's also quite all right. And yeah, I can get in contact with Marita if you have a specific question for her. So then I'll hope she'll be eager to answer them.
Yeah,
Thank you
definitely.
so much, Marita.
Thank you, Adis. Yeah, really important topic. So thanks for having me.
Okay, great. Then this is it. And to you who listens, watches, I'll see you next time, or you hear from me next time with the next interview. Have a good day, morning, evening, night, wherever you are. Till next time.